What happened when a cop pulled a gun on John Kennedy and 5 minutes later, he was the one arrested, left the entire nation stunned. It began on a quiet afternoon outside a small-town diner in Louisiana, where Senator Kennedy had stopped for lunch with 2 aides. As he exited the diner to head back to his car, an unmarked vehicle screeched to a halt. A plainclothes officer jumped out, weapon drawn, shouting at Kennedy to get on the ground. Confusion broke out. The senator stood frozen. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, hands raised. But the officer didn't seem to car or recognize him. Eyewitnesses, said the officer, later identified as Deputy Craig Molson, appeared agitated and aggressive. He looked like he was chasing a suspect, said one bystander. But Kennedy hadn't done anything. He wore a suit and had a Senate pin clearly visible on his lapel. His staffers screamed, "He's a senator!" But the deputy yelled, "Don't move or I'll shoot." It took only seconds for others to start recording the scene. Within minutes, the incident was live streaming across social media. What happened next? No one saw coming. Kennedy didn't flinch. Calmly said, "Officer, this is a mistake. I'm not resisting." But Deputy Molson wasn't listening. He pushed Kennedy against the hood of a car and began patting him down, still holding the gun with his other hand. That's when 2 state troopers pulled up, having heard the radio call. The moment they saw Kennedy's face, their demeanor changed instantly. "Senator Kennedy?" one asked, stunned. The deputy replied, he matched the suspect's description. The troopers looked horrified. The senior trooper stepped forward, lowering Deputy Molson's arm and ordering him to holster the weapon. "This man is not your suspect," he said firmly. "Stand down." Molson resisted at first, muttering he looked like the guy. That was all it took. The troopers immediately ordered Molson to the side, confiscated his firearm, and placed him in handcuffs. The crowd gasped. Kennedy stood stunned. "Are you arresting him?" he asked. "Yes, sir," the trooper replied. "He's being detained for excessive force and endangerment." News vans descended within half an hour. Footage of Kennedy being slammed against a car and the deputy getting cuffed was broadcast coast to coast. The story took over national headlines within minutes. Pundits debated how such a mistake could happen to a sitting U.S. senator. Civil rights leaders weighed in, calling it a disturbing example of how quickly law enforcement can escalate even against the powerful. But the senator himself had a different take. "Imagine if I weren't who I am," Kennedy said. That single quote went viral. On 60 Minutes, Kennedy explained, "If I hadn't been a white man in a suit with a recognizable name, how far would that have gone?" The implications rippled across law enforcement and politics alike. Kennedy demanded a full investigation, not just into Deputy Molson's behavior, but into systemic issues that lead to impulse policing. At a press conference, he said, "This isn't about me. It's about who else it's happening to and who doesn't walk away." Meanwhile, Deputy Molson was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, and abuse of power. His attorney claimed he acted in good faith based on a vague suspect description, but body cam footage showed otherwise. The suspect Molson claimed Kennedy resembled was described as 6 feet 4 inches with dreadlocks and a red hoodie. Kennedy is 5 feet 10, bald, and was wearing a navy suit. The excuse fell apart immediately. The sheriff's department issued an apology, but the damage was done. Kennedy was invited to speak before a congressional panel on law enforcement accountability. "If this can happen to me," he said, "then what's happening to the people without cameras, without titles, without protection?" It wasn't the speech they expected from him. Known for his quirky wit and sharp one-liners, Kennedy suddenly sounded like a reformer. Even his political rivals had to admit it was a powerful, needed wake-up call. The moment had changed him, and the country could feel it in Louisiana. Protests erupted, led not by activists, but by everyday citizens who had never imagined their senator would be the one tackled on camera. One mother carried a sign that read, "If they'll do it to him, they'll do it to us." Kennedy visited the protest and spoke humbly. "I don't know if I've earned your trust before," he said, "but I'd like to start now." Cheers erupted. For a moment, party lines blurred. Incident had created something rare: empathy. Forged through trauma, the governor ordered a statewide review of police training protocols. Kennedy joined the task force. He wasn't just a senator anymore, he was a witness. And he wasn't going to let the moment pass without change. This isn't about headlines, he said. It's about habits. And we've got to break the bad ones. For the first time in years, his voice carried bipartisan weight. The world was watching what he would do next. Back in Washington, Kennedy introduced a bill called the Instant Identification and De-Escalation Act, requiring all officers in plain clothes to identify themselves verbally and visually before initiating engagement. The bill also pushed for stronger body cam transparency, including real-time uploads to internal servers. Critics on both sides of the aisle were stunned, not just by the content, but by the source. Senator Kennedy has shifted, one reporter wrote, from commentator to crusader, and all it took was 5 terrifying minutes. His office was flooded with calls, not just from constituents, but from victims of mistaken identity, wrongful arrests, and police intimidation. Kennedy read every one of them. For years, he said during a Senate hearing, I thought I understood justice, but I only understood law. They're not the same thing. The room fell silent. Even the harshest skeptics couldn't deny something had changed. In him, what began as a humiliating public mistake became the start of an unexpected political rebirth. Deputy Molson, out on bail, gave an interview claiming he had been overwhelmed by a sense of urgency. But the footage was unforgiving. Opinion turned further against him after leaked audio revealed that he ignored multiple dispatch clarifications describing the actual suspect. Civil rights groups demanded his permanent removal from law enforcement. Meanwhile, Kennedy refused to speak the man's name again. It's not about him, he said. It's about a system that allows men like him to act unchecked. Late night shows made the story their opening monologue. But the tone wasn't just comedic, it was cautious. One host joked, a U.S. senator almost got shot over a case of mistaken identity. That's not a punchline. That's a policy failure. Audiences applauded, not laughed. Kennedy was no longer just another politician with a southern drawl. He was a symbol now. A reminder that power doesn't make you immune, and that even 5 minutes can change a lifetime. Months passed, but the memory didn't fade. Kennedy's bill gained bipartisan support. Activists who once criticized him now stood behind him at rallies. One young man from Baton Rouge said, he saw what we see every day. Now he's helping us be seen. That comment, captured by a local reporter, went viral. It was no longer just about Kennedy. It was about trust. Trust, once broken, was being rebuilt from the ground up. One voice, one story, one law at a time. The anniversary of the incident brought new reflection. Kennedy returned to the same diner with his aides and sat at the exact same table. Reporters followed, but he waved them off. Not here to retell it, he said. I'm here to remember it. The staff brought him coffee on the house. Outside, a mural had been painted on the brick wall. An image of Kennedy with his hands raised, not in fear, but in resolve. Below it read, 5 minutes changed everything. Tourists came to take pictures. Locals came to reflect. Kennedy never sought revenge. He sought reform. That restraint earned him respect across communities that once viewed him with suspicion. He didn't pivot for attention, he evolved from experience. When asked by a journalist what scared him most about that day, he didn't say the gun. It said the silence. The silence of people who knew it was wrong but said nothing. I don't want to be one of them ever again. That quote was printed on posters, pins, and even protest signs across the country. Eventually, the incident was adapted into a documentary titled 5 Minutes, The Senator and the System. It won awards for its honest portrayal of fear, privilege, and transformation. Kennedy watched it alone, then called the director to say thank you, not for glorifying him but for telling the truth. It wasn't my moment, he said. It was everyone's wake-up call. And with that, a senator known for one-liners became a symbol of one unforgettable stand. In the end, a gun was drawn, but something more powerful was triggered conscience. 5 minutes on a quiet Louisiana street did what decades in politics Hadn't they made John Kennedy listen, see, and act? Not as a senator, not as a politician, but as a man changed by the truth.